In this module, we will start to get up to speed with React Native. First, we will go over the process of composing components. Components are the building blocks of our apps, so understanding how to create our own will be essential. After this, you should be comfortable creating both class-based and functional components. Then we will go over using props with our components. Props are used to configure the built-in React Native components. We will also use props with the components that we create. Understanding how to use props is a key skill in building React Native apps. In this module, we will also learn how to use some of the components provided by React Native. We will learn how to work with the image, view, scroll view, and text components. We will also learn to apply styling to our components. Although similar to standard CSS, styles in React Native are applied in JavaScript. As a result, the process of applying styles will be different to what you may be familiar with. Routing will also be configured in this module. We need a way to traverse between screens, and configuring routing will facilitate this. We will also add a home screen and about screen to the app. Once we are finished with this module, this is what your app will look like. Although we have added routing, we cannot navigate between pages yet. We will, however, learn how to configure the initial page that's rendered when the app starts. This will allow us to see both the home and about pages before we add a way to traverse between them. Understanding how to create apps using React Native will ultimately come down to components. Learning how to utilize the components provided by React Native is key to building your own apps. You will also need to know how to use these components to compose your own. Vanilla React, which React Native is based on, initially used JavaScript classes to compose components. To give you an example of what this looks like, we will create a class-based component. You do not have to add this component to your app. First, we need to import React. Then after that, we need to import some React Native components. We will talk more about these components as we work through the course. Then we add the class for the component. We need to export the class so it can be used by other components. We create the class by extending the React component class. Inside the class, we will add the render method. This will render whatever we put inside the return statement. We add the return statement inside of the render method. We use the React Native components to display a message. The code inside the return looks a lot like HTML, but this is the special syntax of React called JSX. That's all we need to create a component. If we take a look at the component in the app, we can see that the message is displayed. Now, using class-based components is not difficult, but there are some considerations, such as using the this keyword to understand. Classes were originally the only way to access state in your components, so most apps use class-based components. React now includes hooks, which allows us to use state with functional components. Hooks are special functions that are provided by React. As a result, I rarely, if ever, write class-based components anymore. If we look back at our example, we can convert our component to a functional one. The first thing we can do is remove the import for React. Then we can replace our class with the function. Here we are using the arrow function syntax. Then finally, we can remove the render method, which we don't need with the functional component. The last thing we need to do is export the component. You can add multiple named exports, but you can only have one default export in a file. We could have also exported the component in line like the class-based component, but I prefer to export at the end of the file. Either way is acceptable. If we take a look at the component while it's running in the app, the result is identical. This was a very basic example, but you should now understand how to compose your own components. In the next clip, we will go over using props. When it comes to React components, you will often hear the terms props and state. State is used for information that can change, such as data from a remote source. Props, on the other hand, is for data that is set when the component is initialized. If we look back at our example from the last clip, we can better understand how to use props. First, we need to add props as the argument in the sample component. Once we do that, we can add the props to the message. Any JavaScript expressions in the return statement need to be wrapped with curly brackets. After that, I add the sample home component to host the sample component. This will demonstrate how to apply props to the component. We add the sample component in its own tag. This is identical to the way we use the built-in React components. The prop is supplied using name, which we defined as a prop in our component. In this case, John Doe will be used for the name. After that, the last thing we need to do is change the export to the sample home component. If we take a look at the sample home component while it's running in the app, we can see the name is now John Doe. The key thing to understand is that props will not change over the life of the component. Now that you understand how to use props, in the next clip, we will look at the image component. In this clip, we will create our first component. To avoid cluttering up our app with all the files we create, let's add a folder. In the root of the project, create a folder named App. This is simply a personal preference. You are free to add the files in the root folder if you like. You could even add all the components in a single file if you wish. Inside the App folder, we will create two more folders named Components and Views. The Views folder will contain the components that we route between in the app. The Components folder will house the components we will create to help compose these view components. The first component we are going to create will be for a hero image on the home page. In the Components folder, create a file named hero.js. We don't need to import React, so the first thing we add is an import for React Native. The style sheet is how we will apply styles to the component. The image component will be used to display our hero image. After that, we add the hero component. Since this is a functional component, we don't need the render method and just have to return some JSX. Inside the return, we will add the React Native image component. If you take a look at the documentation, you can get a better idea of the props and methods available to this component. Understanding the props is important because that is generally how we will configure the components. For example, when we add the image component, we will also add the style prop. We will use this to apply some styling to our image. We supplied the image that we are going to use with the source prop. This is referencing an image that I have added inside of the IMG folder that is inside of the components folder. A local image uses a require, while data and remote images use the URI. Then the last thing we will add is the resize mode. This determines how to resize the image when the viewport does not match the image dimensions. Cover and contain will scale the image uniformly, but will handle the width and height a little differently. Stretch will scale the width and height independently, repeat will repeat the image, and center will center the image in the view. We also have some image style props that we can use with the image component. These allow you to do things like alter the opacity or add a rounded corner to the image. Now that we have created our first component, in the next clip, we will finish up the component by adding some styles. In this clip, we will finish up the hero.js file by adding some styles to it. We use the style prop with the image component. With React Native, we style our component using JavaScript. The style names match CSS on the web, except names are written using camel case. The style prop accepts a JavaScript object, but we can also pass an array of styles. Outside of the hero component, we will use the style sheet that we imported from React Native. We create the styles object that corresponds to what we pass to the style prop in the image component above. We use the style sheet create method to create our style object. The first thing we will do is set the height of the component. We set the height to 100%. React Native does not use CSS styles, and this is actually a prop. This is not a prop of the image component, but is instead a layout prop. The height prop sets the height of the component. You must use either points or percentages, as ems and other units are not supported. We will also set the width to 100%. The last prop we will use is flex. This does not work the same way that flex does in CSS. Essentially, when the flex value is a positive number, the size will be proportional to that value. We will set this to 6. Let's say we had another component in this view that had a flex set to 4. That would give us a total of 10. In that case, this component would take up 6/10 or 60% of the view, while the other component would take up 4/10 or 40% of the view. We also have a flex direction prop that determines the axis the components are lined up on. The default is column, which means the components are stacked top to bottom. As a result, the flex property will determine the height of the components. This will make a little more sense once we add this component to the home component. Then the last thing we will do is export the hero component so we can import it into another component. Go ahead and save your project. In the next clip, we will learn how to use the view component. We just finished the hero component, which we will use to display an image. This image will be presented on the home screen. Since this will be a routable component, in the views folder, create a file named home.js. The first thing we will do is import style sheet and the view component from React Native. Then we import the hero component from the components folder. After that, we can add the home screen component. Since we won't be using any props, we don't need to pass them as an argument. Inside the return, we will add the view component. The view component is one of the fundamental components you will use to build your user interface. The view maps to the native view of either Android or iOS. The view can be nested inside other views and can contain multiple children. In this case, we will use the view to wrap our home component. We could apply styles in line if we like, but here we will again use the styles object. If we take a look at the documentation, we can see the props that we have available with the view component. Many of these props deal with touch handling and accessibility. The view component can also make use of the view style props, which pertains to the border style, back face, visibility, elevation, and opacity. Inside of the view component, we add the hero component. Then outside of the home screen component, we will add the styles object. This time we will just add a style named container. The only thing we will do in the styles for the container is add a flex of 1. Now this might be a bit confusing of what this is doing, so let's take a look at the documentation. Flex is a layout prop that we know determines the size of the component it is applied to. Positive numbers will be proportional to the value. Flex is also equal to flex grow set to the flex value, flex shrink set to 1, and flex basis set to 0. Flex grow is another layout prop that we can use. This describes how space in a container should be used among its children. After the children are laid out, any remaining space will be weighted by the children's flex grow values. Since this is the container component for the other components, they will take up the space defined by their flex values. Right now, this is not important since we have only one component, but we will eventually add more to the home screen. If we don't change from the default flex value of 0, then the hero image will not display correctly. The last thing we need to do in this file is export the home screen component. After that, save your project. In the next clip, we will add routing to the project. Now that we have our home screen component, we need to configure it to be the first page displayed in our app. We know the app component is displayed first, and we could replace this with the home component in index.js. Although this would work fine, we will have multiple pages that users can navigate to. In order to navigate between these pages, we will use routing. The app page will still be the first page that loads, but it is where the routing will be configured. The first thing you need to do is navigate to your project in a terminal. First, we need to install React Navigation Native and React Navigation Native Stack. Then we need to install some additional dependencies. Here we are installing React Native Screens and React Native Safe Area Context. Once those packages are installed, go to the app.js file. The first thing we will do in this file is remove everything except for the export for the app component. First, we import the navigation container, and then we import Create Native Stack Navigator. We will look at how these two imports work in a moment. Then the last import will be for the home screen component. The next thing we will do is use the Create Native Stack Navigator function. This returns an object with two properties, screen and navigator. We will use them in a moment. Then we add the app component. Then inside the return, we will first add the navigation container. This will wrap the whole app, and you should only have one navigation container in your app. Inside the navigation container is where you will add the Stack Navigator. The Stack Navigator allows you to transition between screens. Each new screen is placed on top of a stack. The Stack Navigator contains the screen elements as children. The screen element contains the configuration for the route. If we look at the documentation for React Navigation, we can see the props that we can use to configure the routes. The name is used to identify and navigate to the route. The component prop indicates the component to render for this screen. By default, any components that are included in routing will have a header. This header will have a title that reflects the name of the route. We can override this using the options prop. Using the title property with the options will allow you to override the route name in the header. In this case, we will use Globalmantics. In the next module, we are going to replace the default header with a custom one. We will be configuring this using the options. Go ahead and save your project. Now that we have routing set up, in the next clip, we will demo the app. In this clip, we will launch the app and view the home screen component. We will also make a change to the flex setting to see the effect it has. The first thing we need to do is open up Android Studio, then launch the Virtual Device Manager. Use the Virtual Device Manager to launch your emulator. Once the emulator is started, navigate to your project in the terminal window. Once you are in your project folder, you can run the React Native Start command. This will start the Metro Bundler. Once that is up and running, open a second terminal window. Leave the Metro Bundler running. In the second terminal window, we will use the Run Android command. After a moment, the app should launch. It might start up a little faster this time. When the app starts, we should see the hero component take up the entire screen. We will eventually add some more components that will adjust how much space the hero component will take up. Go to the home component in your project and remove the flex from the container style. Then save the project. As you can see, the image is no longer displayed correctly. This is using the default flex set to 0, which sizes the component according to its width and height. If we add the flex set to 1 back to our styles, the image is displayed correctly. This uses the cover resize mode with the image component to scale the image so that it fits inside the view. Now that we have previewed our project, in the next clip we will add an about page. In this clip, we're going to add a page that explains everything about Global Mantics. In the Views folder, create a file named about.js. We won't be using any custom components for this page. We will instead make use of the components provided by React Native. First, we import the style sheet, text, scroll view, and image from React Native. After that, we will add a couple variables that will contain some dummy text. The text we include will be identical and just gives us something to use as a placeholder until we get the final copy that will be used for this page. Take note that the text is enclosed in backticks and not single quotes. This gives us the advantage of using a multi-line string. Then we add the about screen component. Then inside the component, we will add the return statement. Now that we have added our about screen component, in the next clip we will learn about the scroll view. Instead of the view component, we will wrap the about page with the scroll view component. This is a scrolling view that can hold many components, but should not be used for long lists of data. That is because the scroll view renders all of its child components at once. If you need to display long lists of data, the flat list component is the better option. The scroll view will work fine for the about page since we only have a few components to display. The scroll view must have a bounded height to work properly. We can set the height on the scroll view directly, but this is discouraged. The suggested practice is for the parent view to have a bounded height. The scroll view that we use will be wrapped by the navigation container in Stack Navigator, and as a result will work correctly. If we take a look at the documentation for the scroll view, we can see some of the props that we can use with this component. The horizontal prop will allow you to scroll horizontally instead of vertically. The indicator style prop only applies to iOS. This allows you to change the style of the scroll indicators. Now, keeping in mind that we are building a mobile app, there are also props that deal with the device's keyboard. Keyboard dismiss mode determines how the keyboard will respond to a drag. And the keyboard should persist taps prop determines how the keyboard will respond to a tap. The scroll enabled prop allows you to disable scrolling using touch interaction. Even if you set this to false, the view can still be scrolled by using the scroll to method. The scroll to method allows you to scroll to a given position in the scroll view. There are many props and a few different methods that you can use with the scroll view. Your best bet would be to check out the documentation to see everything that you can do with this component. If we go back to the about.js file in our project, we can add the scroll view. The only prop that we use with our scroll view is the style prop. After that, we add an image component. The image that it uses is also stored in the img folder inside the components folder. Now that we have added the scroll view, in the next clip, we will work with the text component and finish up the about screen. The next thing we will add in the about.js file is the text component. If you look at the documentation, you can see the many props that we can use with this component. The text component is how we can display plain text inside of our app. There are also some text style props that are available to us. These props deal with the look and the style of the text that is displayed by the component. For example, we can change the text color, font family, or font size using the text style props. The first text component that we add will be for a title. The title that we display will be wrapped by the text component. Then we add the content. This text component will use the about global variable, so we have to wrap the expression in curly brackets. Then we add another image component. And then after that, we add another title. Then the last thing we will add inside of the scroll view is another block of text that uses the what global variable. Again, we wrap the variable in curly brackets. Underneath the about screen component, we will add the styles object. In the styles for the container, we will just add some padding to the top. Then in the styles for the images, we will set the height to a uniform size. Then in the styles for the titles, we add some padding to the top. This ensures the title is not pressed up against the image above it. We also centered the titles with the text align prop. Then in the styles for the about text, we add padding on the bottom, left, and right. Then the last thing we need to do in this file is export the about screen. Now that we have added our About screen component, we need to include it in routing. Let's go back to the app.js file. First, we need to import the About screen component. Then we can add the screen for the About component above the screen for the Home component. The name that we will use for this route is About. The component that this route will use is the About screen component. And the title that we will use in the header for this route is About Us. Go ahead and save your project. In the next clip, we will demo the app once again and view the About page. In this clip, we will demo the app so we can view the About screen component. We will also take a look at how we determine which component is displayed when the app starts. Now, the thing to understand is that we have added the About page, but we have no way to navigate to it. We know the home page was displayed the last time we launched the app, but what will happen if we launch the app now? We added the About route above the Home route, so what effect do you think that will have? First, launch Android Studio and open the Virtual Device Manager. Then start your emulator. After the emulator starts, navigate to your project in a terminal window. Then run the React Native Start command to launch the Metro Bundler. Let the Metro Bundler continue to run and open up a second terminal window. Navigate to the project folder and use the React Native Run Android command. After a few moments, the app should launch. Now, the About text does not render correctly because we wrapped the line so you can see it better. We can fix this by making it one line. After the text is fixed, go ahead and save your project again. Now the text is fixed and everything in the About page is working correctly. But why is the About page displayed instead of the home page? If we go back to the app.js file in the project, the order of the routes is the key. Since we did not specify the initial route to display, the first route it finds is the one that's rendered. If we change the order of the routes, the home page would be displayed first. Fortunately, there's a much easier way to decide what route is rendered when the app first starts. If we set the initial route name prop on the Stack Navigator, we can specify the first route to display when the app starts. If you set this to home and then save, the home page should be displayed first. In this case, we have to reload to see the changes. In the Metro window, hit the R key to reload. Now the home route is displayed first. We have no way to see the About page right now, but we will sort that out in the next module. Coming up in the next module, we will add a user registration feature to the app.